What's good? Welcome back to Inside the Green Room with Danny Green. I'm Harrison Sanford. A bunch to discuss in this episode. Danny's former teammate Ja Morant seems to have a big-time punishment coming up after the NBA Finals. Speaking of the NBA Finals, the Phoenix Suns hired a coach who has won an NBA Finals so that hopefully Devin Booker can get his first title. But let's talk about this year's NBA Finals. Game number 2 just went down in Ball Arena, and the Miami Heat overcame a double-digit deficit in order to get a win and tie the series at 1 apiece. In fact, Danny, it is their 7th double-digit comeback in the playoffs, which ties them with the Warriors of the Kevin Durant years and two different iterations of the Miami Heat team. But before we even, the Warriors from last year and 2 different iterations of the Miami Heat team. But before we get into what happened tonight, let's talk about, in general, the importance of winning game number 2 when you are the road team, or at least getting one on the road. You've played in a multitude of playoff series and finals. What would you say is the mindset about stealing, quote unquote, stealing one on the road early in the series?
All right. Before we get into that, I meant to ask you before we got on air, is there some type of different meaning behind the hat? Because this is a new thing for you. Are you?
Your boy needs a haircut. Your boy needs a haircut. So
I do too, man. This is our podcast, our people. We in the living room, we chilling. They see us when we rough, when we look good. You know, I'm rough right now.
I don't put it on wax.
Okay, but a lot of things that we got to get into, like you said, Phoenix coaching staff, Miami obviously stealing game 2. So the mindset going into when you're on the road, especially when you're the underdog team. You know, I've been that before. And then that was my first year in San Antonio in 2013. We were not favorites to win against Miami. So back then, before they changed the series to 2-2-1-1-1, it was 2-3-2. So our mindset is, we got nothing to lose. We got our backs, not our backs against the wall, but nobody's expecting us to win. Nobody's expecting us to play well. So we just went out, played free, had a lot of fun. And we actually had 2 good games. I think we stole the first one, honestly. So as long as we get one on the road, we know we're at home for the next 3 games. So I think Miami's mindset was, we don't want to go down in a whole 0-2. Even then, it's not a series until somebody wins on the road. So even if they lost tonight, they still could have won their 2 games at home, and it's still been a great series. But so coming in on the road against, the top team, you're the underdog team, your mindset is, we have nothing else to lose, really. There's no expectations. Nobody's expecting us to win, except for us, everybody in this locker room. So let's go out there, trust each other, play with each other, and have fun as much as possibly can, and just, continue to fight, keep fighting, and you never know what's going to happen. All the pressure is on Denver. So with that being said, I think Miami came in with that loose, mentality, free-spirited, type of play. They obviously executed well, and they played hard, more force, defensively, put a different zone, press on them. But they shot the ball very well, and that was pretty much the big difference in the game. And in the fourth quarter, like you said, they shot extremely well, playoff, I think, high in history of the NBA. So that's a big difference in the game. And also they limited the other guys, which allowed Jokic kind of forced Jokic to play one-on-one and beat them one-on-one, which, as you've seen in Denver's record, they don't have a great record when Jokic tries to beat teams one-on-one himself.
Yeah, we'll get into all those in just a bit, but just a little refresher for you, my friend. 2013 NBA Finals, game number 1, 92-88 victory, in which you scored 12 points over the Miami Heat. We all know how that series ended up in the end, but that is what happened, at least in the beginning of that series. To your point, let's get down to the nitty gritty. Let's take advantage of your NBA Finals expertise and basketball expertise. Question number 1, the Miami Heat went 11 of 16 in the fourth quarter, 5 of 9 from the three-point land. Their field goal percentage, 68%, the 4th best mark in the history of the NBA Finals in a fourth quarter. How do the Miami Heat continue, or at least in this game, how did they generate all of those good looks? Like, obviously, you hit hard shots, but a lot of these looks were clean looks that the Miami Heat were able to generate. How did they do it?
Well, they did a great job of continuing to put Jokic and Murray in pick and roll and pin down situations, which made Denver have to decide if they're going to switch or not. Even when they had the rookie in there, Christian Brown, see what he was going to do. They had Duncan Robinson. Once he hit a couple threes, Jeff Green coming out there, trying to guard, those guys on the perimeter, all coming off pin downs. It's a different type of ball game for those guys. But once they hit a couple threes and also got some at the rim, Duncan Robinson changed the game, not with just his threes, but his curls to the basket and his his rim attacks. You know, he had one N1 and he had one curl for a layup, which was a big basket for them. When that happened, next you know, they're looking like, all right, we can't leave this guy. We can't switch. Now you got two guys going to Duncan Robinson. Gabe Vincent wide open in the corner. Trey Ball, he was like 4 for 5 from three. He had 20+ points. Once again, Miami's others, a huge difference maker in these games, in these series. And that's what kind of dictated the tempo and the pace of the game. It changed the game, basically.
Yeah, so they basically attacking Murray, Jokic in that pick and roll and in those situations where they got to communicate really well, and they cause a bit of havoc. It's the power of the 3-point shot and the connectivity of the Miami Heat. Let's go to another thing that stood out for sure.
Before we got to that, they put a lot of pressure on all those other KCP as well, having them chase, but drawing fouls. They got to the free throw line a lot more, and not just on getting to the basket, but on the 3-point line. I think KCP might have had 2 or 3 fouls on the 3-point line.
Yeah, 2.
Kalo jumped into him, fouled, and then Gabe Vincent coming off the screen, jumping into him and causing those fouls. KCP ends up fouling out at the end of the game. That leaves you one less shooter when you're down 3 at the end of the game. So them getting to the free line, putting force on the rim, but also drawing fouls on the perimeter with those tight curls, pin downs, constant movement, knowing that there's going to switch, allows you to get some easy, you got a passer like Bam, allows you to get some easy backdoor layups and some passes or curls to the basket like Duncan Robinson got, or you'll get a pin down pop out or a curl or a 3-pointer in the opposite wing or opposite corner or the same side corner.
Yeah, a lot of the shot attempts today, a little bit better distribution for the Miami Heat than it was in game number 1. Game number 1, Bam Adebayo set a career high in field goal attempts. Not so much today. The person that he was guarding, Nikola Jokic, went off again. And Danny, I feel like this guy doesn't miss. He is so good in single coverage, but he didn't see as much double teams. Today only had 4 assists. Jamal Murray, after having 15 field goal attempts in game number 2, only had 22 actually in game number 1, 15 field goal attempts in game number 2. Michael Porter Jr., only 5 points. The stats for Nikola Jokic when he's under 10 assists versus when he's over is pretty alarming. When he has 10 or more, Denver Nuggets 34-4. When he has 10 assists or less, 14-17. My question to you, my friend, how do they is there a way where Nikola Jokic can be a facilitator? Can Michael Malone draw things up so that he can help Jokic more as a playmaker? Or is it just, hey, if it's single coverage, it's single coverage. You got to go to work.
Yeah, I think it's kind of one of those things. If it's in coverage, you got to go to work. But you got to have more pace, which allows those other guys to give him some more room. But also it makes those other guys make decisions of whether to go, to help, to not, and allows those other guys to get free. When I look at the stats, I look at, obviously, when he has less than 10 assists, they're very bad. When he has more 10 assists. So that lets me know, as a guy like Michael Porter Jr. or KCP, you got to find the ways to get him or get yourself involved while he's catching it in a one-on-one post. And that's either moving without the ball, either cutting back door, or finding space, finding a window for a 3, or just running out in transition, getting pace. And there's a couple of times where he brought the ball up in transition and went coast to coast for a basket late, where he'll normally find somebody for a 3-point shot. But so when I look at the stats, I'm looking at those 2 guys in the starting lineup, where KCP only got 4 shots and then Michael Porter Jr. got 8 shots, and they didn't shoot it well. But also it's just the attempts. They're not really getting a lot of great looks or great rhythm looks, and that's because they're probably their pace. And I think Miami did a great job of slowing that down with that full court zone press, which changed the game for them a little bit. And obviously Jamal Murray got less attempts too. Then they just let Jokic said, "You're going to let him beat us one-on-one," because when that happens, it's not good basketball for Denver. You know, it's not their normal style of play, and they're known for losing when they play that way. And that's what happened.
Yeah, Jokic, Jokic was getting like 7-8 dribbles with his back to the basket. Nobody was doing anything other than let him get to the basket and score. But to your point, I think that's, wise. Like, just because you're not open doesn't mean you can't run yourself open. If you're Porter Jr., if you're KCP, if you're any of the other guys on the court there with Nikola Jokic. That's something to watch out for game number 3.
And of course, Michael Malone can definitely draw. He has X and O's out the ass. We know he's great with it. And I've seen it in Cleveland. He's got some great stuff. So I know there's definitely things after timeouts he can throw up some plays and just have some more ball movement to where Nikola Jokic and those other guys might get some better attempts. We know Michael Porter Jr. is always good for making some tough shots contestedly, but you got to get him a couple, one or two that's wide open. And KCP, he's more of a guy that likes to catch wide open shot. He's not going to take the contestant. He's going to make the extra pass. He's not 6'10". Michael Porter Jr. is 6'10", could shoot over people, but sometimes that doesn't always work. But I think you'll look at Mike Malone, you'll see Mike Malone have some more X's, O's, and some draw ups out of timeouts to where you'll see a hammer action, maybe an elevator or a pin down or something to where Nikola Jokic is not I wouldn't say he is the what's the name? What do you call it? Decoy. He's not the decoy, but he can have some other decoys out there or players not necessarily for him, but they're gonna make him. They're still at Miami. They found what they needed to find. They made more shots, of course, but they also said, you know what, we're gonna make him beat on one and have Bam hopefully not get in foul trouble, but make him guard Jokic one-on-one and make him beat him one-on-one. So they found the hidden tool to kind of defeating Denver.
Yeah, and one of the things that helped is also Kevin Love, who I thought they gave him some great minutes in game number 2. We got a couple of minutes left here in this segment, so let's talk about it real quick. Game number 3, one of the headlines going into it will be, I think, the return of Tyler Hero. What is Eric Spoelstra gonna do with a 20-point per game scorer in their rotation now? How would you handle it if you're Eric Spoelstra?
Well, it seems as if Caleb Martin is slowing down just a tad bit. Gabe Vincent still playing a high level. I would use him and split the minutes with Caleb Martin, depending on how Caleb Martin comes into the game, how aggressive and how well he's shooting it. Also, Duncan Robinson, Max Strus. Max Strus came in hot to start, and the second half kind of cooled down. Duncan Robinson gave him the lift in the second half, so they kind of split those minutes. But I would continue to use him. He's another pick and roll guy. When you got a pick and roll guy that can score in a pick and roll, you got to exploit that with Jokic and Murray. And also he's another, threat for curls and pin down shooting. So when you get him to come off pin downs or curl to the basket, it's going to bring 2. And guess what? Somebody's going to be wide open. He's very much not just a scorer, but also a guy you can use as a decoy to get those other guys still open. Which is an advantage. So when you got 1-1, it's even now. You go back to Miami and you got another threat coming off the floor or onto the floor for you. I say Miami is in a very comfortable spot right now.
Real quick before we go to break, only one word answer. Who wins game number 3?
Denver.
Yeah, I think Denver got it too. As good as Miami looked, I'm still rolling with the team that's better on paper with the 2-time MVP Nikola Jokic. I don't know how they're gonna do it, but I feel like they're gonna get the job done.
It's gonna be the same game. It's just Miami's not gonna shoot as well in the fourth quarter. They can't. I don't see them shooting that greatly for back-to-back games. So we'll see.
Yeah, it should be fun. As of right now, Miami Heat are 2-point underdogs at home going into game number 3. When we come back, it's time to talk about one of Danny's former coaches back in the head coaching position, Frank Vogel to the Phoenix Suns. We break that down next right here on Inside the Green Room. We're back inside the Green Room. Danny Green, Harrison Sanford. A little programming update for y'all. Catch Danny Green on ESPN NBA Today on Monday when this podcast comes out. You could also catch me on Stadium Network inside the association with Cam Smith and Shams Charania and Pat Garrity. That will be 2 Eastern. So you can actually kind of watch us back to back, kind of like from 2 to 2:30 with me, and then from 3 to 4 with Danny, Eastern time. But you guys are listening to the podcast, so we might as well give you the stuff. You get the goods here first.
Podcast.
You get the goods here first. So let's talk about a couple of things. Number 1, Danny's former coach, Frank Vogel, is now the head coach of the Phoenix Suns. My question to you, Danny, when Matt Ishbia brought Frank Vogel into the interview room, what do you think he was left the most impressed by with Frank Vogel?
That's a good question, man, because I don't know some of these interview processes. I did talk to Nick one time. I think we had him on a podcast at one point. And
Nick
we asked
Nurse,
him,
yes.
Yeah, we asked him, what was the weirdest thing somebody asked you, and asked him, give him a joke. What are your can you draw up a play if we're down 3 with 5 seconds, 8 seconds to go? I think they were probably impressed with his X's and O's, his defensive principles, which I was always impressed with, his ability to think on the spot, in game situation if they put him in those type scenarios. And I'm sure they're probably impressed with his dad jokes because he's a Ted Lasso one-line hitter, man. He always has a bunch of one-liners and some great dad jokes for you. So that's one of the things that I did miss about being in the locker room with. So there's a multitude of things, but I don't know how that interview process went. It's different for different organizations, for different coaches. But if I were me and I had to guess, it would be those things.
You remember a dad joke that he told?
No, but I do remember the fact that we had random clips, highlights. We would have something comparable to what happened in a game to like a video clip. Like, this is what happened, and then we have like a viral moment. And one of the ones that we did not know, that I didn't know when I was there when I played for him, was that he was a young ball boy teenager talent, and he could brush his teeth while spinning the ball or write a pencil.
What?
Or spin the. You have to look up this video, man. He has a little YouTube video, Frank Vogel, when I think he had the ball, he could spin it on a pencil or something like that, I was writing, or on a toothbrush, like that type of thing. He did one of those at like halftime shows, or he did like a talent,
talent
teenager,
show,
something like that. He'd be like a halftime
brushing
show
his teeth while spinning a ball in his finger
on the toothbrush holder, on the toothbrush. Like, he'd have the toothbrush on the spinner on the. He had like a Globetrotters type situation going on, and I think he would spin it on the pencil that he was having, or the toothbrush that he had while it was spinning on objects, and he was very good with maybe juggling and all that type of stuff. So he was a young talent. That's one of the weird things that I found out about him as one of his players.
Maybe he just walked into the interview room and was just like spinning a basketball on his hands. Like, how do you break this down? Let me tell you guys. Like, it's just mad casual. Just like, he's like, yeah, what are you going to do in the pick and roll when they got DeAndre Ayton, they're attacking DeAndre Ayton? Well, in my history, just like spinning the ball.
Maybe.
Who knows?
Maybe he had his ring in there with him. He could have just flashed the ring and, or maybe spun the ball in the ring. He probably, but that's not him. He's not coming on his cocky shit, but some guys could walk in on the cocky stuff. Sam Cassell, he's got some experience, and he's on Boston sidelines now, very well deserved. But there's a lot of guys that have a good resume that's more than enough outside of the interview, process, can show you why they should be hired.
Speaking of being cocky or having the rights to be cocky, I tell you this, Danny, if I was Monty Williams, making $12 million a year to be the head coach of the Detroit Pistons, I would definitely have a little, 13. I definitely have a little pep in my step. Let's talk about Monty Williams signing the deal to be the head coach of the Detroit Pistons. We could talk about, the money. We could talk about, how leaving Phoenix and all that, and how he was able to pick up the pieces. But let's just get to one basic question, particularly with the roster they have there. How do you think he would qualify, the Pistons ownership would qualify his term as head coach being a success? Yes, obviously, if he wins the NBA championship, it's a success, but you got to also take in consideration the roster. What do you think Monty Williams initially would qualify as a successful term as head coach of the Detroit Pistons?
In terms of his tenure there in Detroit?
Yeah, like, like, again, like winning an NBA title, like, of course, that's an excess, but that could also be seen as like above realistic expectations. What do you think is a realistic goal?
First and foremost, congratulations to Frank Vogel. I'm happy for him, but Phoenix should have never fired Monty. He was a great person for the job, and I think he's a great person for this job because he's a culture changer, and I think he helped change his culture. Now, realistically, looking at what the expectations are for me and what they should be seeing, in my eyes, I think, not his first 2 seasons, probably not a win season, but trying to get 50-50 or close to in his first year. Whether it's winning 40 games, in the first 2 years, 40, 41. And by year 3, you got to be in the playoffs, whether it's 7-8 seed. And then
play-in or playoffs?
That's both to me. Play-in and playoffs are the same to me. So you got to be, I think by year 2 or 3, maybe play-in for sure by year 2 or 3, but you got to be in the playoffs by year 3. Whether it's 7-8 seed, you got to be in that. He's in there for 5 years, maybe. I think 5 years he signed for.
Six-year deal.
Okay. So within the 3 years, I think that he has to be in the playoffs. I think that's the expectations. And it doesn't have to be high playoff seed, but 7-8, or at least in the play-in. By year 5, 4 or 5, for sure have to be in the playoffs. And I wouldn't say they need to make a run or anything like that, but by year 6, by the end of his tenure, they have to be a team that's considered a solid team in the East. And they're a playoff team, and it could be consistently in the playoffs, a great foundation of a team that they can build something on, and hopefully get back to that Detroit Pistons team that we've seen with Chauncey, Rip Hamilton. Obviously, you're not going to get those type of players, but that type of chemistry. You have Rasheed, Ben Wallace. So, that type of Tayshaun Prince. It's hard to find those pieces, but they can get a young core, a young group foundation where they're in the playoffs consistently, and a team that can probably be a contender at some point soon within the next span after the first 3 years. Between that 3 to 7 year mark, they have to be a contender.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you look at that situation in general, because there's Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, James Wiseman, Isaiah Stewart, Jalen Duren. A lot of draft capital has been used on a lot of prospects. It's not just about them learning how to, it's not just about them becoming all-star players potentially, or some of those guys becoming all-star players, but it's also training them up so that they can have long careers as professionals. That is Monty Williams' chief responsibility in Detroit. We'll see how he handles that. When we come back from break, I want to talk about one of Danny's former teammates as we await what seems to be a very severe suspension. We talk about Ja Morant next, right here on Inside the Green Room. All right, we're going to take you to behind the scenes a little bit of the podcast. Off screen, we're having a discussion about the number 2 or the number 3 pick in the NBA draft. One of those is going to be Scoot Henderson. The other one is going to be Brandon Miller. But obviously, Brandon Miller is going to have a very serious wave of interviews and inquiries around everything that happened with him on the University of Alabama campus, which leads us to also talk about Ja Morant, who has gotten in a world of trouble for brandishing firearms on Instagram and social media. Before game 1 of the NBA Finals, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver said that the punishment will come after the NBA Finals because he didn't want to distract from the actual NBA Finals itself. Let's go to some other personalities who talked about Ja Morant as well. Kendrick Perkins on ESPN recently said that Memphis is not the environment that Ja Morant needs to be in, and maybe his NBA career would be better played in another city. Also, Stephen A. Smith said on the Rich Eisen show that some people in NBA circles fear that Ja Morant might not have a life to live anymore. They fear for his life over the next 5 years or so if his actions continue the way they are now. Danny, for me personally, I'll leave the whole Kendrick Perkins, Memphis is a bad environment to another group of people. That's not for me to discuss. And Stephen A. Smith's comments, that's what he's saying. He's hearing from certain NBA circles. That's what he's hearing. But for me, the Adam Silver thing was interesting because as a guy who works in media, Danny, and I had this conversation with other couple of people. If I want to hide news, I
wouldn't bring it up at all.
do it. I would do it on a Friday. It's called the Friday news dump. You'll notice that whenever something negative is happening to like a team or organization or a company, not just in the world of sports, but in general, when something negative happens, you usually drop that information Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern, because it's the end of the week. Not a lot of people are going to be talking about it. You would never drop negative news on a Monday. That's one thing. But also, if you're the NBA, I thought Adam Silver was going to deliver the news on Thursday because it's the NBA Finals. You do the press conference. You say, hey, Ja's going to get suspended for 25 games. We talk about it for 30 minutes. And the next thing you know, it's NBA Finals game 1. And so you don't really think about it. You don't really talk about it as much as maybe you would at the end of the NBA Finals. So it leads me to believe, Danny, a long way of saying this, that whatever suspension is going to come out, whatever news, whatever information that was grabbed to warrant the suspension that Adam Silver is going to give out is so impactful, so newsworthy, so engaging in the contents of it that it would supersede an NBA Finals game. That's why he's decided to wait until after, because that's how big this news apparently would be. Usually you could hide these type of things in an NBA Finals game, but Adam Silver is basically saying they can't. Whatever is going to come out is going to be more noteworthy, more attention grabbing than an NBA Finals game. And that in itself leads me to be, if I was a Memphis Grizzlies fan, very concerned about what's going to happen, not just the suspension length, but the additional information that Adam Silver said that he found during this time leading up to this potential punishment. Your thoughts?
I agree, but I think my thought was, if you want to hide it or don't want it to be news, it's going to be news even if you bring it up. I just say don't bring it up at all until the finals are done. So when you bring it up that we have news, now people are, trying to inquire, people trying to find out, people are going to continue to discuss, and it's going to take away some, not as much of the attention on NBA Finals. But I think, if you just want to leave it be and not have any effect on anything, just don't speak about it until the NBA Finals are done. But he had his press conference. Reporters are going to do our jobs. We're going to press him about he made himself available to the media. There is no way he was going to do that press conference without somebody asking about Ja Morant. I guess so. But so I don't know about the Fridays and keeping it hidden, but I'm learning, and it makes sense. But I just think if you don't want it to be talked about, don't bring it up until you're ready to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Adam Silver could have said, they're still doing our investigation. We'll circle back when the time is right. But he basically said, we have the results of the investigation. The punishment is about to be, he didn't say the punishment is going to be severe, but he did basically alarm everybody that it was so impactful that it'd be more noteworthy, more important than an NBA Finals game. I know you're a part of the NBPA union there. You have a voice there, so I don't know how much you can say on it, but if you have any other tidbits, any other breadcrumbs that we could take from your side of things, the NBPA side of things, I'm sure I'd love to hear that. And the full quote here from Adam Silver: we've uncovered a lot and we don't want to distract from the talented players playing in this finals. Again, when you decide that the NBA finals could be trumped by suspension news, it leads me to believe that the suspension is going to be hefty, and or the information that leads to the suspension is definitely going to be noteworthy. Any breadcrumbs you got for us? And if you don't, I understand you got a role to play in the NBPA.
I wish I did, but I don't, man. And honestly, if I did, I probably wouldn't give as much. I'd give a little bit because this is our shit. This is our podcast, our people. But I haven't been filled in on it. I have talked to Ron Kempler. I've talked to many other people, give my thoughts when the scenario happened, and try to give the approach, the JJ approach, which I love that he always backs the players. That where he was at, what he was doing, is it illegal? He's out of season, and is there any rules in the contract or in the league that say that you can't do this, this, and this? Now, in my mind, if there isn't, then he shouldn't be penalized as bad. Now, there should be a penalization. Don't get me wrong. It should be a punishment. But I think with this new information and with this new things happening, maybe they need to have a new rule. This is how some of the laws are made and built. So-and-so versus so-and-so. So-and-so this. Ja Morant, whatever. Latrell Sprewell, can't choke your coach. Anything that comes up, you have to have.
Come on, bro. We're not doing that. Yo, come on. You got common sense. You got common sense. I know you got to protect the players. There's common sense rules, bro. Come on, no.
It's a bad analogy, but when you have things that happen, when you have these things come about, this is when rules happen. So now it's like, further instance, now we're going to put this rule in that any player, member team, no matter what state you're in or what it is, regardless, you cannot on your social media present, show, or do these type of things. You have to act accordingly. Now we know that there's a moral code, ethics code, which is why he's been punished now. But because there isn't no particular rule, I don't think it should be a full season. Like that. That's kind of, I think that's too harsh for something that's not really breaking a rule, per se. But so they can make it a rule. There should be a suspension. There should be some penalization. But yeah, what I've heard and what I've talked to, I've given them my thoughts and presented they should attack it out, how to protect him and how they should go about it. And they said, well, that's the right way to go about it. We're trying to say, he was in his own home. It's not against the law in his state, et cetera. He might have a license to carry, so that type of deal. But we'll see. We'll find out after the finals. We don't know how long that's going to be, but at least we have 5 games right now and it's not going to be a sweep. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm definitely excited about the NBA Finals, and to be fair to the Nuggets and to be fair to the Miami Heat, it is nice that we're focusing on them, not Ja Morant. Even though obviously Ja Morant, as you can see, still deserves some talking about because he is one of the young stars in the NBA. All right, so enjoy Danny on NBA Today. You can find me again on Stadium Network as well. That will be on Monday, and I'm there throughout the week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So we talk about the association all the time. We love it. And programming note as well, we'll be back here Wednesday after game number 3, and then we'll be back Sunday night after game number 5. So enjoy your breaks from basketball. I don't know how y'all are surviving. I don't know how I'm surviving without basketball games every day, but nonetheless, looking forward to game number 5. Thank you for tuning in, and see you next time. Peace.
Game number 3, right? Game number 3?
Game number 3 after game number 3.
Yeah. Here you go.
What did I say? Did I say something wrong?
You said game number 5.
Oh, my bad. Yo, we'll be the game show after game number 3 and after game number 5. No post-game show after game number 4 because that's a Friday and we got to live.
There you go.
See you guys next time.
Peace.